So now let's go back to what I said before. We want better titles on these things. We want them titled, but we know we had one problem. One problem was this 2000 null for 2455. That null represented data. So we need a way of identifying a total row versus a data row. Recognizing that this is an issue so that you can label things properly and so on, Oracle introduced something called the grouping function. It only applies to the rollup and cube, and what it returns is a 1 or a 0. A 1 if the row is a total row, and a 0 if the row is a data row. And you're going to do a grouping based on a column, and it's going to tell you for that column, is it a data row or is it a total row? Once you know that, now you can do, we're going to see you can do something like either a decode or a case expression based on whether you had a 1 or a 0 and display the data or display something else. That's the nice part. How do we do that? Let's look just at what the grouping function does to understand it a little bit better. Here's our year region, sum of total sales, just what we did before. We're going to group by cube, but we're going to do grouping of year and grouping of region. We've got 2 more columns. Here's our grouping of year, here's our grouping of region. Notice the zeros represent data rows. All of those rows are data. So for these years, we are all data rows. We had no null in there. So those are all 0. And down here are all our 1s. So these nulls over here represent summary rows. That's the easy one. The one that gives us really extra functionality is the grouping by region. Because here, these are data rows, 10, 20, 30, 40. The 10, 366, this null actually represents an aggregate row. It's a total row, so that represents a total, and therefore the grouping of region gives us a 1. This 10, 20, 30, 40, and the null for 2455, all are zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 5 zeros there. So even though this is a null, it says, hey, I know this is a data row. Don't think this null represents a subtotal. It's a data row. The subtotal is down here at the 12602. That's the subtotal. Again, these are data rows, okay, 10, 20, 30, 40, and the null data row, and down here at the bottom, this is a subtotal row, subtotal for year and region. Now, knowing that, that's what gives us the ability to title these properly. We're going to use the grouping function, and here I used it in a decode. I decode the grouping of year. If it's a 1, I say all years. All years, wherever it was a 1, wherever it was a 1. If it's not a 1, I just leave the year alone, whatever the value was, and I'm set. Same thing with grouping, decode grouping of region. If it's a 1, I say all regions. If it's not a 1, I just leave the region alone. So here was my 2000 null 2455. I left that null alone. I didn't change it. So this is pretty cool, with one exception. This gives us pretty much everything I want, but you know, I've been ordering it by year and region. And notice, okay, I was a little careful here. All my numbers sort before my alpha, you know, so you got to be a little careful with your naming conventions here to get them to sort right. But what happened here is notice the 2000 with the null data sorted after the all regions because nulls sort high. And my all years and my null here, which was null data, that sorted high, and I really didn't want the 2455 here. I wanted it before the all rows. I wanted the all rows below it. Same thing here. I didn't want the 2455. I wanted it above it. Now you could have done the sort, and you could have done nulls low, or nulls first rather, order by year, region, nulls first, you know, and you could have done something like that. But there's a better way to do it. There's a better way to sort this data. And the way to sort it is use these 1s and 0s in our sorting so that I can get, I'm going to sort by the year indicator first, 1s and 0s, and within that I'll sort by my year. And then I'm going to sort by my, within year, I'm going to sort by my row indicator because I'll get the 0s first and then the 1s. So that will allow me to get my data rows first. And how do I do that? All I do is grouping, or my order by grouping of year, which gets the 0s first and the 1s. And within these zeros, when they're all the same, I group it by the actual year, 1999, 2000, and all years. And then within that, I group it by these zeros first here, and then the ones which makes my output all exactly the way I wanted it. 10, 20, 30, 40, and null here is 2455. That null is data, this null is data, and there's my totals.
Quick question, Jeff.
Yes.
Do you have to show the grouping columns on the right there, the grouping on year, the zeros and ones?
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, you generally would not. I'm doing it just for clarification so that everyone can see, that it really lines up nicely.
Excellent, thanks.
You certainly don't need that.